podcast.
Can we just talk about what's good right now? Because I've been focused a lot on what's not good. You know, political news, assassination attempts, evidently a corrupt judiciary, enabling all sorts of awfulness, and it's just bringing me down. It is lowering my vibration. It's been lowering my sense of optimism. It's been instilling in me, or cultivating in me, a sense of hopelessness. For the most part, we're not even talking about my country, but I was prepared to come on here and break with tradition and just launch into kind of a diatribe about what's going on in the world these days. And you never have to look all that far to find something to be upset about or bothered by or to just feel hopeless about. And I thought, what is my responsibility as a person with just an enormous platform and influence? What is my responsibility here? In the face of all that would seem lost, what is my obligation? What is my moral duty in delivering this week's show? And part of me just wanted to go into all of that stuff, but it always felt just a little bit not right to me. And so that left me in this position of, what do I do this week? What do I do this week feeling the way I've been feeling? Feeling somewhat hopeless, feeling frustrated, feeling angry, feeling all of the things that a lot of people feel these days, given all of the things that are happening in the world right now. And what I've realized is that to pour fuel on that fire does not help and does not serve, right? My ego certainly wants to launch into a tirade about a lot of different things, but it does not serve. It does not help. All it does is further inflame and justify in other people that sense of anger, perhaps even that sense of violence. And I don't want to process that, and I don't want to be that. And so can we just talk about what's good? Because the antidote, one of them, to this feeling of anger, to this feeling of hopelessness, and to the low vibration that it brings, one of the antidotes is to simply flip the script and focus on the opposite stuff. Things grow where your attention goes. There's a saying something like that. And so if you want to cultivate in yourself a feeling of despondency and hopelessness and anger and powerlessness and all that stuff, then just by all means continue to focus on all of the negative things that are going on. And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't stay informed, but there are ways of doing this with a sense of detachment. There are ways of doing this with a sense of self-preservation, being informed without being absolutely absorbed. I've been absolutely absorbed. And so one of the things you do is that you focus in the other direction. So let's talk a little bit about what's good, okay? What's good is I did not die. I did not perish Saturday evening driving home from Windsor to L-Town with Ken the Zen by my side at, 1:30 or 2 in the morning on the Highway 401, which for our American listeners is the Ontario equivalent of your standard interstate, okay? Your 2-lane highway and 2 lanes each way highway. And we're just driving home from a gig. We played a wedding with Fresh Breath on Saturday night. Beautiful, beautiful location right on the riverfront, looking across the river at Motown and sunshine and warm and summertime. And a wedding, man. I made a joke at Katie Pasco of Fresh Breath. At one point during the speeches, we were one of 2 bands that were playing the reception. And I whispered into Katie's ear that I hate weddings. You know, using a little bit of irony, using a little bit of positional irony to make a joke. Not true. I don't hate weddings. And it was a beautiful wedding and a great reception and an edifying reception amongst lovely people with, and this is also good, a tray of McDonald's hamburgers and a tray of McDonald's cheeseburgers. Fantastic idea for late night snacks at a wedding reception. And when you're in the band, most of the time, you get to partake of these things. And the open bar, etc., 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 must do that responsibly, kids. You are technically at work and you must be responsible. Played the wedding and had a really great time, as always, with Fresh Breath and with Area 51. Great band. Had a really great night. And so we're driving home. It's about a 2-hour run from Windsor back to L-Town. We had left my place at maybe 12:30 in the afternoon, and we're going to be arriving at like 3 a.m. It's a long dang day, kids, but that's what we do for rock and roll. And incidentally, if you want an inside look at that, go to Ken the Zen's YouTube channel. That's my whimsical world of Zen, I believe. And he's been doing these videos recently, kind of day in the life of a musician videos, where it just starts at the beginning. You see like 8 or 10 minute videos of just the day unfolding. Here we are, now we're traveling, we're packing the car, setting up, here's the gig, here's after the gig, and interviewing people along the way. Really, really fun kind of slice of life, behind the scenes insider look at the life of a gigging musician. I do appear in some of those videos because I'm on the gigs. So you want to see a little bit about that wedding gig, you can over on Ken's YouTube channel, okay? We're driving home. And what, to my wondering eyes, should appear in the headlights' glow at the last possible second, but something large and black on the highway, which as we ran over it turned out to be a piece of tractor, trailer, tire, tread. That's a bit of a tongue twister. Some transport truck tire blew up. Huge strip of rubber on the ground. We run over it because there was no avoiding it. And just as our hearts are beginning to settle back in place, there appears another one, and we run over that too. And that sucks, man, especially when you wake up the next morning and discover the damage on the underside of your car, which I must take now to get repaired. That's a freaking drag. And you're inclined to look at that and say, that's bad. And by certain metrics, it is bad. I got to pay for whatever damage has to be fixed, and we're crossing our fingers that it's not that extensive. And you feel like that's a bad thing, but then you look at it from the other side, and it's like, well, that could have been really, really bad. That's a big piece of rubber tire, okay? Could have been something heavier, more solid than that, right? Could have broken off the whole front axle of the car. Who knows? We could have flipped. I tried a little bit to swerve around the second one, but there just wasn't enough time. That could have gone badly. Could have been an animal, could have been a person. Who freaking knows? It could have been really, really bad, and we could have been really, really hurt or worse. And so it's good that we did not have a worse experience than we did in that circumstance, all right? And it's also good that later on that drive home, just a few blocks from my house, we were driving along a 2 lanes each way street in the city, and there's a car in front of me on the right that, you drive long enough, you just develop a sixth sense about whether that guy's going to swerve into your lane without seeing you. And sure enough, he did. And I had to swerve around him and hit the horn. I've hit the horn maybe 3 times in my whole life. I'm not a horn guy. And yep, there it was. Had to swerve around him, had to hit the horn. And it's like, crikey, man, can we just get home? And we did. And it was good. And we were safe. And it's not always easy to look at that as a good thing. But I'm looking at it in retrospect now thinking, that's 2 times. When at very least, my car could have been pretty seriously damaged, or at worst, we could have been pretty seriously damaged, and we're not. So we're thankful for that. I also want to say it's good that I am getting a handle on the song Whipping Post by the Allman Brothers. Whipping Post has become a staple of the Fresh Breath show right from the very beginning. When Ken and I first joined that band a few years ago, they threw at us a set list for the first gig we were going to play, largely comprised of Fresh Breath originals, which are all great, but they do a healthy selection of covers as well, as, you know, indie bands are kind of required to do. And so we had to learn all of these originals, and then they threw these covers at us, which is not normally a big deal, except you get to something like Whipping Post by the Allman Brothers, and you realize huge sections of that song are in 11. My musicians out there will understand what I mean when I say those songs are in 11. Most of the time, what you hear on the radio is in 4, meaning 4 beats to the bar. And you can count that 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Makes sense to your ears. It's what you almost always play in terms of a time signature. Sometimes 6 on the radio. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you'll feel that. If you're not musicians out there in the world, you'll feel that. 11, you can't dance to. 11 is what we call an odd time signature, because it's odd. Once in a while, you'll hear like a Rush song that's in 7, or Money by Pink Floyd is in 7. That's rare. Okay, that's a really rare thing. And to play something in 11, even more rare. And then when you sit down and you listen to what Butch Trucks played on Whipping Post, the drummer from the Allman Brothers, there's just a lot going on there, man. And sections of it being in 11, and then sections of it that you might count in 6 or might count in 12 as kind of blues vibey sections of the song. It's a really, really challenging song. And it remains a running joke in the Fresh Breath band that song is a freaking nightmare for me, because I had to learn to try to play it in amongst learning all of these other originals for that first gig. And I was like, are you really dropping this on us right now? Like, all these originals, and you're going to drop a tune like Whipping Post for me to try to figure out along the way? You know, have a heart, guys. But they expressed confidence in my ability to do that, and that confidence was more or less rewarded. I tried. There's no way I was going to play it like Butch Trucks, okay? There's just no way I'm going to do that. He plays so many. I played like a quarter of the notes that Butch Trucks plays in that song, but I tried to the extent that I could to remain more or less faithful to what he did, to at least give the vibe of it. And we've been playing that song for a few years now, and it just keeps getting better and better and better, because I'm developing my own idiom with it. I'm becoming more confident in my style of playing, so I can offer an homage to Butch Trucks in some of the stuff I do on that song. But more and more and more, it's becoming a song that I play the way I play it. I'm not even sure he ever played it consistently the same way. It's just what was recorded was what was recorded. I'm learning to play it in my own particular way, which is more simple and less like the Allman Brothers played stuff, or like stuff was played 40 years ago or whenever this song was released, maybe even longer than that. And so it's getting better. What I'm saying is that it's getting better, and that I'm beginning to develop, finally, after all this time, a pocket with that song, whereby I've had people come up to me after recent shows and just gush about how great that song was, and how, quote unquote, one guy said, "You just nailed it, man." And I laugh so hard, because if you compare what I play to what Butch Trucks played, I didn't nail it, man. I nailed my version of it, which is a much simplified version, but it actually works. And dynamically, it's fun, and we're locking in on that as a band really, really well. And we typically end the night with it, and it's ending with a cracker, man. It's ending with a bomb, and I'm very pleased about that. There's something really, really fun and exciting as a drummer, as a musician of any sort, I suspect, about taking on a song like that and then actually beginning to nail it and beginning to feel confident in it It's a really, really satisfying feeling to just work your way through and then begin to own and nail something and know that it's tricky. It is tricky. Counting those instrumental sections in 11 and then making that really awkward transition from 11 to 6. If you're not a musician, this doesn't mean anything to you probably. You musicians know what I'm talking about. Like trying to cop the feel of 11 and 6, but then making that transition between the two, it's a really weird song. But then trying to drop in some dynamics to it, and then the way that song kind of builds up towards the end and then goes haywire. There's a lot of drum fills. There's a lot of stuff going on. It's big, it's boisterous at the end. And then there's just a major bang stop right at the end. And we've been hitting that beautifully. Just a huge stop. And there's just a couple seconds of dead silence in the room. That's a powerful thing. If you're in the audience and a band stops that tight, that's cool. If you're in the band, that's like, yeah. Like when you nail a stop, dead on, dead silence, and then Katie's voice comes in to lead us into the outro section of that song, which is a very slowed down, like 12 or 6 blues feel. Really, really great. And when I think about how I started with that song and how intimidating it was, and how I've gone through this evolution of learning to play it and then learning to play it my way and having some confidence in my own way of doing things, that's not something that I've been great at as a drummer. There's always been a certain amount of self-consciousness, but I'm learning as I go that you can play stuff your own way. You don't always have to note for note what the original drummer did, because in most cases, even the original drummer doesn't note for note it live. You know, whatever happened in the studio happened in the studio. And live, it's a different animal, or there's a little bit more freedom to play, or they do it just a little bit differently. There's some stuff that has signature licks in it that you've got to try to do. Like if you play In the Air tonight, you kind of got to do the thing, right? To the extent that you can with 2 drums instead of like 45, like Phil Collins has. Sometimes there are signature things that you gotta at least try to do. Most of the time, as long as you keep the feel and the vibe and the general arrangement, you can just play a song the way you play it. I'm learning that as I go, especially a cover, and to feel the way Whipping Post felt at that wedding on Saturday night. And I'm always amazed because who listens to the Allman Brothers? But every time we play and we end with that song, people love it. People jump up and people actually know it. And I'm amazed. And I didn't think that would be a crowd pleaser, but you have to trust the artist you're playing for. They know their audience. They know what works. And they're like, trust us. Whipping Post always kills, and we never get to play it with a band. You know, that was the early days because they mostly play as a duo act. So we never get to play this with the band. It'll be great. Like, okay, we'll try. I don't know. Does anybody like this? Turns out they do. And they're liking it more and more because we're nailing it more and more and more. And that is edifying. Okay, not just that song. The whole experience of playing with Fresh Breath. The bride and groom requested of us a few covers for signature moments in their reception. And we had never played those songs before. And in fact, didn't even rehearse them. Josh and Katie have been out west on the road. There was no chance to rehearse before this gig. And so we just had to trust each other that when we got into the room at that moment, we had done our homework and we're going to play those songs together. And we did. And that takes some diligence on the part of the players to actually learn the proper arrangement, practice it, and get it internalized. And also we have to be able to trust each other when we get into that scenario, to listen to each other and to pay attention to each other and to watch each other. And the more you play with different people, the more you begin to recognize those cues and who is leading at what moment and what you need to do and what to pay attention to. And that can only come from playing a lot of gigs together. And we're reaching that point. We don't play together a whole lot, 5 or 6 times a year, probably, hopefully more in the future. But it's been long enough now that we're beginning to really feel comfortable with each other on stage. And so you can show up at a gig having learned songs but not played them together. And then no pressure. It's just our wedding dance, the first dance. No pressure at all on this, kids, and actually pull it off. And I'm proud of them for that. And I'm grateful to them for the opportunity to continue playing with them, And that's good. That's good. The night we played that show, very early on in the evening, a ripple went through the audience when it was revealed that somebody had taken a pot shot at Donald Trump at a rally. Okay, the assassination attempt was that night. And how easy is it, again, to immediately get caught up in that event, because that's a seismic event, and then to get caught up in this speculation and this narrative about was it faked and who was it and what's it going to mean and is he dead and is anybody dead and was it even real? And because, the discourse has become such that you can't believe anything. I don't want to go down this hole, and I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist, and I don't want this to be political. But what can you believe? All right, what gets said publicly? I'm trying to be very delicate here. There's just a slight trend of misinformation and perhaps outright lying. And so when stuff happens, now you've reached this point where, well, is it true? Is it real? Because we've been taught that nothing is. We're taught to not believe anything. So I don't know. Is it real? I don't know. So you can get caught up in this. And then that just opens up the Pandora's box of getting angry about this side or that side or the state of things. And I could be focused on that. And it's hard not to be. Like, I'm trying to stay away from social media right now because I can't take it anymore. Right? The whole thing makes me so angry and so dispirited watching what's going on down there, knowing what I know about history and how this stuff happens. And it just makes me rage. I mean, the burning rage inside. I can understand why the tribalism happens. I can understand why civil wars happen. I can understand why this entrenchment and bitterness and hatred and animosity develops. And when you develop a tribe around that animosity, how this becomes hardened, how this becomes a powder keg, how this explodes. Because I feel it too. Okay, I feel the rage too. And I have to check myself against buying into that rage and closing my mind on that rage and not being open to any other point of view or fact, if any exists, because who freaking knows anymore? It's very easy to harden yourself and then group into a tribe of hardened people. And all of a sudden, it's like hive mind. It's like mob mentality, and it's just attack at that point. And I see it happening, but I understand why it happens. If people are not self-aware, if people are not conscious, it's very easy to get pulled into that, and catastrophe happens. It plays itself out over and over and over and over. I see the threads combining right now for it to happen again, and it makes me freaking crazy. And so what do? I am utterly powerless to do anything about that. And so to dwell on it just damages me, all right? Just poisons me. So what do? You look back at that day on Saturday when that assassination attempt happened. We should not be assassinating would-be political leaders. We should not be engaging in political violence, okay, no matter what side you're on. I could still be focused on that. That could be the enduring memory of that day. That could be the enduring memory, along with look at the damage to my car from that exploded tire that I ran over. Those could be my memories of the day. Instead, I'm choosing to remember a cheeseburger, some lovely gelato, and how great it was to nail freaking whipping post. You know what I mean? I'm not being ignorant. I'm not burying my head in the sand. I am choosing to be aware of a circumstance without, to the extent that I can, attaching emotionally and then engaging in the toxicity. You have to keep yourself somewhat separate from that. If you're like me and you're inclined to lose your freaking mind about what you see happening and how Wrong. It is. What else is good? What else is good? I have been rehearsing with Carly Thomas Band again. That's really good. I've been able to play with Carly much over the past couple of years. She was in California. She was in Nashville. Hasn't been around a lot. You know, I have a long history of performing with Carly. And we're doing the L-Town Pride this weekend. And Carly's one of the headliners at that event. And she's got the band back together. And it's really fun because it's a mix of various Carly bands that have existed. When I first joined the band, it was Ken the Zen on bass and the great Pat Dryberg on guitar, electric guitar. And then that changed over time. There's been people come and go. But this iteration of the band, Ken's back, Pat's back. The great Chris McCready, the current lead guitar player on most of the gigs, is also playing it. It's like this great big family of Carly folks. And how exciting is that? To be able to play Carly's music with these guys, all of whom are wonderful players, wonderful human beings. I have loved playing with all of them. I love them all as individual people. And how exciting is it? And I feel a pride. I feel a pride in playing Pride, you know? And I do not want to get wrapped up in the politics of that either. But for me, I am proud to be on the stage playing Pride, you know? And if you question Pride, that's why there needs to be Pride, okay? And again, this ties into a lot of what I see developing below the border and where that could go and how unfair and how discriminatory and how prejudiced and how dangerous that can freaking be. And it just drives me nuts. Drives me nuts. And so it is my pride to stand in solidarity with the people I love and to support acceptance, to support diversity, to support staying the hell out of other people's freaking lives. And so I'm excited to play Pride with Carly. We're also playing Windsor Pride, which is always a great freaking time. They have a really, really great Pride celebration there. And who doesn't want to play an event that is about people being proud and accepted for who they are? Okay, I spent a lot of my life, if we can get personal here, I spent a lot of my life under a kind of, I don't even know what to say. I spent a lot of my life feeling like it wasn't okay to be me. Okay? Grew up in the evangelical Christian world where you're only allowed to be a certain sort of person. You're only allowed to be a certain way and think a certain way and believe and behave a certain way. And if you're not that, you're not okay, man. And so I wasn't a lot of that, but I had to pretend to be, and that was damaging and toxic to me, okay? So I'm quick to stand up in circumstances where we're celebrating people being allowed to be who the hell they are without threat of violence or judgment or any of that stuff, man. Again, I'm not trying to turn this into a freaking rally. It's just, I think we ought to leave each other alone, accept each other for who they are, and stop imposing our judgments upon them, okay? So I'm happy to play those Pride events. I'm so excited to play with Carly and the gang again, and they're going to be really good shows, really great music. Carly's originals are freaking dynamite. We're playing some covers that are going to be a lot of fun, a little bit challenging, and that's good. You know, if you are a musician, especially in the current climate, gigs are good. A lot of us didn't have gigs for a long freaking time, man. And to have gigs now, even though it's not the schedule it used to be able to play festivals like this, to be able to play again with people you love, to be able to be parts of a celebration like a wedding like we just did, these are really good things. It's so easy to find yourself wrapped up in all that is not good. And what comes with that is this fear and this hopelessness. And those things either breed a kind of despondency or they breed a kind of anger. And we see the results of those things. It's so easy. It's so easy to get lost in that. And I've found myself being lost in that. And I've talked before about how your worldview can become so small, right? And so if you get wrapped up in lies and deception and corruption and hatred and finger pointing and accusations and danger and toxicity, then you begin to look around. All you see is all of those things everywhere. And you completely overlook the great gig you played or the fact that you didn't freaking die on the highway. You know, we can become so myopic. We can become so focused on such a little thing. And if that thing is toxic, your whole world becomes toxic. If you can focus on some of the sunnier stuff, then maybe your world becomes more sunny than dark. I'm trying really hard to do this because my mindset, my mental state has not been great lately because I've been so obsessed with some of this dark news and some of the frustrating stuff that you see going on. It's really, really difficult to exist with any sort of hope in the face of what seems to be happening, not just in the States, but in Ukraine and in Gaza and wherever you look around. You know, it's not difficult to find stuff to be upset and dispirited by. Trying to keep my spirits high. And so this is why I'm talking about these good things. This is not a Pollyanna thing. This is a technique. It doesn't mean you ignore the injustice or the toxicity in the world. It means that you don't become absorbed in it. And you can be much more functional when you feel that there's still something to be optimistic about. You know, one of the things that I've talked to Ken the Zen about is just in the face of all of this, holding on to hope. You lose hope, you're really, really trouble, man. You're in trouble. It's like the Shawshank Redemption, man. Don't lose hope. You lose hope, you're done, you're cooked. And even if things look really, really dark, you have to hold on to some shred of hope. And one of the ways that you do that is just to shift your perspective and your attention towards the positive things. You know, that brings in more positive emotions to you. And so it's with great hope and optimism that I say the Galactic Cowboys have launched a Kickstarter campaign to raise funds to record a new freaking album. Yeah, man. Galactic freaking Cowboys. Now, we know one of my favorite bands of all time. Been around, I think their first album was 1990 on Geffen Records. I don't need to tell the whole story of Galactic Cowboys here, but they released a bunch of records between 1990 and the year 2000. One of my favorite bands of all time, and I am delighted now to be able to say quite genuinely that the bass player, Monty Colvin, is a friend of mine. And I've talked about Monty quite a lot on this program. They ended in the year 2000. All right. It just, bands end. And then we didn't hear from the Cowboys for a long time. And then in 2017, they popped up and said, hey, guess what, everybody? We're back. And it was back with the original lineup. We're releasing a new record. They called it Long Way Back to the Moon. It was a banger, great record, and Galactic Cowboys fans were so excited. And then, as is typically the story with Galactic Cowboys, things just didn't quite work out. And if they had tour plans, I don't know. They didn't really come to fruition. And then I think they had problems with the label. And, it's just the endless loop of bad luck for the Galactic Cowboys. And we thought after that, maybe they'll do more records. But then it's been 7 years. It's beginning to look like maybe that wasn't going to happen. And maybe it isn't. It depends on the success of this Kickstarter. And so as a fan of the band, as a friend of Monty, I'm just talking about it now to let you know. Okay, if anybody out there has been a GC fan as long as I have, would like to hear some new music by those guys, go to the Galactic Cowboys page on Facebook. You can find a link to the Kickstarter. It's an ambitious Kickstarter, okay? They're trying to raise a lot of freaking money to record this album and then to do all of the associated stuff that costs money, like print vinyl, print CDs, do the marketing. I don't know if there's budget in there for shows or what, but they're feeling this out. It's like, if we can raise enough money to make this viable, we will do another record. And it's been amazing to watch actually how the fans have already begun to line up. They've raised a lot of money in just a week since this Kickstarter launched. People are really, really excited about it. And I'm really, really excited about it too. Right? These guys are in their 60s now, but that 20-year-old musician in you is still there. Still wants to play, still has it. And it's one of my favorite bands of all time. So of course I'm going to support. And if you're into Galactic Cowboys, please consider supporting as well. If you've not listened to Galactic Cowboys, do so. Go and pick up the Space in Your Face record or the original self-titled record. Those were the two on Geffen. Those were the metal records. I was going to give you a Galactic Cowboys song recommendation. I don't have any new music to give you this week. But it's funny, I was kind of sifting through the archives of Galactic Cowboys. You would expect me to give you something from one of the Geffen records because those are the big records. Okay, that was major label stuff, big tours. And at that moment in time in the early 90s, Galactic Cowboys seemed poised to be a thing. And they were promised by Geffen Records that they would be a thing. They were playing this very interesting combination of, it was distinctly metal. There were some thrashy elements to it. But with those thrashy elements, 4-part vocal harmonies, really kind of, they were described as kind of Metallica meets the Beatles sort of a thing. I don't think they sound anything like Metallica, but it was definitely metal. It was big 4-part harmonies. It was something very, very different sounding, particularly in the early 90s. Hair metal was dying out. The grunge thing hadn't really kicked in yet. And then in amongst that sat this band Galactic Cowboys, playing really heavy stuff, a lot of interesting time changes and texture changes. Some really cool vocal harmonies happening, a very, very unique sound. And then the second record, Space in Your Face, was somewhat delayed because Geffen was getting ready to put out, I think it would have been Use Your Illusion, the Guns N' Roses record. Galactic Cowboys had to wait. And then they were at like a party, a record label party at some point. And one of the A&R guys came up to them and said, "Hey, check out this band we just signed. They're getting ready to drop Space in Your Face, right? This is going to be the record that's going to break Galactic Cowboys to the next level. Check out this band we just signed. They're called Nirvana." They put in the tape and they listened to it. So, that's interesting. Fast forward a year, Nirvana is the biggest band on planet Earth. And grunge has taken over the airwaves, and whatever Galactic Cowboys is doing is not fashionable anymore, and they lose their deal with Geffen. That's how fast this stuff happens, kids. But they moved over to Metal Blade. They dropped several more records. They were touring. It was all smaller scale, and then it eventually just reached a point where we can't sustain this anymore. Let's go our separate ways. But they came back in 17. They're trying to come back in 24, 25, and I applaud the effort. And if you want to listen to some Galactic Cowboys, go listen to the first two records. Those are the big ones. My favorite is Machine Fish. I own the original canvas of the inside cover art to the Machine Fish record. Monty painted that. I own it. It's sitting behind me right now. It's one of my prized possessions to own the original painting from my favorite Galactic Cowboys record. But what I'm going to give you as a song to listen to, apart from those first two records, and even Machine Fish, is a song from kind of one of the forgotten Cowboys records, which is The Horse That Bud Bought. There's always an element of goofy that ran through Galactic Cowboys. They were always quirky, made them kind of fun. So they did an album in 97 called The Horse That Bud Bought. And by that point in time, their sound had very much changed because the grunge thing was happening. And so they had made a deliberate shift, beginning with Machine Fish, to move into more of a raw kind of grunge sound. Still some metal elements, but a very different sounding band than it started. And The Horse That Bud Bought was probably as grunge as the Cowboys got. This is 1997. And there's a deep cut on that record. It's the last song on the album. It's called My Life. And for that record, at least, it's probably the most metal sounding song or one of them, but it's not. It's more of a ballad, but it's kind of a heavy one. And it's just a song I always liked. The chorus says, everything I do hurts someone. Everything I do hurts someone. Everything I do hurts, And it's kind of this confession of feeling responsible for everything in the world, And at that point in life, when you feel that way, you kind of need to look for some of the good things, So as a bit of a deep cut and a bit of an off-the-board pick to go on the John Huff podcast, referenced on the Podcast 2024 playlist, I'm choosing My Life by Galactic Cowboys, and I reckon I'll put Whipping Post up there too, just for your edification. That's where I put the music that I listen to, kids, all right? So if you haven't checked out that playlist, do. You may find your new favorite song, your new favorite band on there. I'm excited about the Galactic Cowboys Kickstarter. Check it out. Pledge, make a donation if you can. And that'll be great. A Long Way Back to the Moon was more of a shift back towards the metal side of Galactic Cowboys, which is what the fans wanted all along. I think they were trying to play the market in the middle 90s, trying to survive. You can say that they were on a major record label, and they were, but they didn't make any freaking money because almost no band actually does. Then in the 90s, they're not on a major anymore, and they're trying to make it work. They're trying to still find an audience and stay present in the music scene. Shifted to more of a grunge sound. Long Way Back to the Moon was more of a classic Galactic Cowboys sound, more of a metal record. Good one. I suspect the next one will be too, but we'll have to wait and see if it even happens. And that depends, kids, on you and me funding good people making a good project. So Galactic Cowboys page on Facebook, and maybe I'll post it actually to the podcast page as well. See how that goes. But that's a good thing. Okay, not dying is a good thing. In an awful car wreck. Nailing a difficult song is a good thing. Having gigs to play, good gigs with good people is a good thing. And when one of your favorite bands of all time pops up after 7 years and says, hey, we want to make a new record, that's a good thing too. What that does for me is it mitigates just a little bit. It pushes back just a little bit against the darkness, man. You got to kick at the darkness until it bleeds daylight. One of the ways you do that is you just begin to look for the positive. Do that. Okay, if you are feeling, as I've been feeling, the great heaviness, just a shadow descending. And I have felt that way. Ever since the pandemic, I felt like something is not right. Right? It's the empath in me. I have felt a shift. It's a frightening one. And I want to be absorbed by that. Because all you do is perpetuate that energy. All you do is perpetuate that feeling. And what it does is it corrodes you. It destroys you from the inside out. It makes you rotten. And I don't want to do that. So if you're feeling the darkness, you're feeling the heaviness. Actually, one of the things you can do is go listen to the darkness, because they'll put you in a good mood. Try to look for the positive things, all right? Try to look for what's good. There's a Patreon page for this podcast. It is patreon.com/JohnHuffPodcast. Mention it to you now, just in case you are inclined to contribute to my own little sort of perpetual Kickstarter. $5 a month to join there. If you want to help me out, if you genuinely want to help me out, apart from that, please tell people about this podcast. I've done all the stuff. I've tried the marketing. I'm so sour on social media. I don't want to post. I don't want to cease. I just don't want any part of social media these days. And I've tried my hardest to build a presence there for the podcast, and nobody cares. It's just very, very difficult to do with the all-seeing algorithm. Tell people, word of mouth is the best advertising. It's what works the best. So if you know people who could use a pick-me-up, podcast fans, people who might enjoy what we're talking about on here, just let them know, please. Share the episodes, tell your friends, and I appreciate genuinely your support. That's a good thing too, Sometimes it feels like you work in a vacuum, and it's nice to know that some of you are out there supporting and listening. That's a good thing too. I hope this episode has been good for you. I want this program to be edifying. When I'm talking about serious stuff, when I'm talking about goofy stuff, and I'm still trying to hone in on what the essence is here. I do know that I want you to come away feeling like whatever you just listened to was worth listening to. So I hope it was. I'm going to go now. I got to edit this thing and get it ready. Focus on the good stuff. and try to keep it positive. Do not get lost in the shadow. To the extent that you can, try not to get lost in the shadow and try not to lose hope, okay? Because in the end, well, I can't promise anything, but try not to lose hope, all right? Thanks for listening. Gonna shutting up, except to say, hey, good things happen when you put yourself out there. And hey, kids, I'll check you later. Yeah. Everything I do hurts someone. Everything I do hurts. Everything I do hurts someone. Everything I do hurts. And I can't get to the note that Ben gets to from there.